Washington. Late evening. A thin, persistent rain fell from above, reflecting off the windows of the office buildings. A man in a gray coat stood in the light of the street lamps. Michael Brenner, 37. He held an umbrella, but even under it, he looked soaked to the bone. Not from the rain, but from what was happening inside him. He held a phone in his hands. On the screen was a photograph. His wife, Emily, laughing in the arms of another man. The photo was taken from the window across the street, through a long lens. He had received it this morning from the private investigator he hired 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of doubt, anxiety, sleepless nights. And now confirmation. Betrayal. Michael closed his eyes. He felt everything inside him breaking. He didn't scream, didn't throw the phone, didn't cry. He simply took a breath and quietly said to himself, "Okay, then it will be so." Emily was everything to him. They met at university and lived together for 12 years. They had a house in the suburbs, a dog, and plans for a child. Michael worked as an engineer at a large IT company, Emily at a contemporary art gallery. He always admired her taste, her smile, her confidence. But in recent months, she had changed. She became cold and irritable. She couldn't put her phone down. She came home late from girls' nights. Michael tried to talk, but she laughed, saying he was paranoid. And now the photo. Strangers' hands on her body. Eyes that once held only him. The next morning, Michael came to work as usual. No one noticed the change in him. He smiled, joked, drank coffee with his colleagues. But inside, everything was empty and dark. He wasn't planning to start a scene. He was planning. He understood. Real revenge isn't about yelling and fighting. Real revenge is about silence. Calculated. A couple of days later, he called the detective and asked for more information about his lover. It turned out to be Richard Holmes, 42 years old, a financial consultant, married with 2 children, wealthy, respected, and outwardly impeccable. But behind the scenes, he was a gambler. He had debts. Lots of debts. Michael smiled for the first time in a week. He knew where to start. With the help of an old programmer friend, he gained access to Richard's bank records. Richard loved betting, casinos, and quick money. Michael created a fictitious investment platform, into which Richard soon transferred a large sum, hoping for rapid growth. A month later, Richard realized the money was gone, but it was too late. Everything had looked legitimate. Michael watched the confident, self-satisfied man crumble and felt a strange relief. But that was only the first part. Next was Emily. He didn't shout, didn't ask why. He started acting like he didn't know anything. He cooked dinner for her, was caring, attentive. She noticed the change, but chalked it up to his guilt over their recent arguments. Michael bought her a gift, a pendant with their wedding date on it. Emily burst into tears. She hugged him and told him she loved him. And that night, when she fell asleep, he took her phone. He forwarded a few messages, took a couple of photos, setting her up. Now, in Richard's eyes, she looked like a traitor, leaking his debts to someone else. A week later, everything ended between them. Richard began avoiding Emily, and then stopped responding altogether. She didn't understand what had happened. She cried. Michael watched silently. But that wasn't enough. He wanted her to feel the pain he felt. He arranged everything so that she would be fired, quietly, subtly. One call to the gallery, a fake letter from a client, an accusation of selling a fake painting. Emily's reputation was in ruins. She came home broken, her eyes red from crying. Michael hugged her, pretending to support her. She believed. He looked at her and thought this was justice. But soon he began to be tormented by dreams. He saw her face, frightened, lost. He heard her say, "I still love you." Sometimes he woke up in the night, not understanding which of them was the monster. One morning, he walked into the kitchen and saw Emily sitting by the window with a letter in her hands. "What is this?" he asked. "From the bank," she said quietly. "Our account is frozen. I don't understand why." He realized he had gone too far. Their whole life was tied up in that account. Emily looked up at him. There was despair in her eyes. "Michael, what's happening to you?" He didn't answer. A week later, she packed her things and went to her sister's. Michael was left alone. The house became quiet, almost dead. No laughter, no footsteps, only the ticking of the clock. He had achieved everything he wanted. He had destroyed his lover. He had destroyed her life. But now there was no joy, only emptiness. A month passed. He learned that Richard had committed suicide. Debts, dismissal, a broken family. It all came together too perfectly. And then Michael realized he had killed a man. Maybe not with his own hands, but he had killed. He sat in the car in the rain, listening to the drops hit the windshield, and for the first time in a long time, he cried. Not from pity, but from realization. He had become the very thing he hated. A few days later, he arrived at Emily's. She opened the door, aged, tired. "We need to talk," he said. She remained silent. He told her everything, about the photo, about Richard, about the lies, about his revenge. Everything, honestly, without any attempt to justify himself. She listened silently, her eyes empty. When he finished, she only said, "I knew you'd find out, but I didn't think you'd go this far." A pause. "I cheated on you once, but you cheated on yourself forever." She closed the door. Michael stood on the porch, motionless. The wind fluttered his coat. Raindrops streamed down his face. There was a feeling inside, not guilt, not pride, something in between. The realization that life would be different from now on. Empty. 6 months passed. Michael sold the house, quit his job, and moved to Seattle. He rented a small apartment overlooking the bay. He worked quietly, unnoticed. Sometimes, passing storefronts, he saw a reflection, the same person who had once loved, then sought revenge, and now simply lived. Sometimes he received unsigned letters, short sentences. "Are you free? Was it worth it?" He didn't reply. One night, he woke to the sound of footsteps on the balcony. He went outside, no one. Only the cold air and the subtle scent of her perfume. He smiled. Perhaps it was just the wind. Or perhaps a memory. He looked into the darkness and quietly said, "I'm no longer seeking revenge." And that night, for the first time in a long time, he felt better. 3 years passed. Seattle greeted the morning with a soft fog and the scent of rain. Michael stood by the window of his 23rd floor apartment, sipping black coffee and watching the city awaken. Cars hummed below, boats glided over the water. It seemed life had finally found peace. He'd almost forgotten what that night in Washington had been like, the rain, the confession, her eyes, almost. His job as an engineer at a small IT company didn't pay much, but it offered what he'd long sought: silence. He no longer thought about revenge, no longer looked for the guilty. He simply lived. Without love, without hate, simply existed. But deep down, he knew. The past doesn't disappear. It waits. And one day it will return. It happened in November. That evening, as he was returning home, an envelope lay on his door. No name, no address. Inside was an old photograph. He and Emily at a picnic, laughing, holding hands. On the back, a short phrase. "Do you remember how it all began?" Michael stared at the photo for a long time. Something in his chest sank, as if an old scar had reopened. He sat down on the couch, closed his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, allowed himself to remember her face. It all began the night Mark realized his marriage was dead, not with drama or shouting, but quietly, like a light bulb burning out in a hallway. He came home later than usual, around 9:30. The house was softly lit, filled with the smell of vanilla and coffee, too warm, too peaceful to be real. He heard her laughter, short, quiet, a little forced. And a man's voice, confident, relaxed, too comfortable for a guest. Mark didn't walk in. He stopped in the hallway, took off his coat, placed his briefcase down, and listened. The voice talked about an exhibition project, then a trip to New York, then about her. About Sarah, his wife. The tone changed gentler, closer. He didn't go into the kitchen. He walked out, quietly closed the door, went to his car, and sat there in silence. 5 minutes passed. He didn't move, just breathed, listening to the distant hum of the city. And in those 5 minutes, he understood his life had changed forever. He didn't start a scene. The next morning, coffee, as usual. Good morning, you're up early? Meeting at 9. No hints, no questions. But something in his eyes had shifted. Cold, precise, as if he wasn't looking at his wife anymore, but at a problem that needed solving. Sarah didn't notice. She was sure she was in control, that Mark, always busy with his law firm, would never suspect a thing. Her lover was a coworker, an art director, younger, confident in that arrogant way she mistook for charm. Mark found out about him 3 days later. Not from her, from her phone. She'd left it on the living room table. He hadn't been snooping. The screen just lit up. A message popped up. Have you told him yet? I can't wait forever. He placed the phone back exactly as it was, didn't open it. But an hour later, he quietly hired a private investigator. Just the basics: name, address, habits. The detective worked fast. Within a week, Mark knew everything. The hotel in Seattle, the fake girls' weekends, the business trips that weren't. He didn't rage. He didn't break things. If anything, he became curious. He'd spent his life building strategies, legal battles, corporate wars. He knew how to wait, how to watch, how to strike when the opponent thought he'd already won. This time, the opponent was his own wife. He didn't confront her. He kept playing the role of the caring husband, steady, attentive, predictable. Brought flowers, asked about her day, pretended not to notice her secret smiles at the phone. Behind that calm surface, he built a plan. He didn't want to destroy her with shouting. He wanted her to see her own world collapse piece by piece, quietly, inevitably. He wanted her to understand what she'd lost. The first thing he did was change his will. No one knew except his lawyer. He left everything, the house, the savings, the investments, to a charity fund named after their late daughter. Sarah thought it was all in her name. Her first mistake. Next, he reassigned her office project under the control of a new associate, young, ambitious, hungry. Officially, it was a promotion for her. In reality, it was a setup. The associate knew about her affair and didn't mind using it to his advantage. A month later, Sarah began to notice the shift. Mark was even more attentive, came home early, cooked dinner, asked about her day. She relaxed. Convinced herself that maybe it was fine, that maybe she didn't have to ruin everything after all. But calm is also a weapon. Mark just waited for her to make the next mistake. It happened at the company gala. They arrived together. She looked stunning, dress, smile, confidence. The lover was there too, and he slipped. His eyes lingered on her a little too long. Later, near the end of the night, he came closer and whispered, "After dinner, same place?" Mark smiled, raised his glass, and said quietly, "Of course, after dinner as usual." Sarah froze. The lover didn't understand, but Mark knew she did. She realized he knew everything. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He just became softer, calmer, gave her time, and the silence drove her insane. Not rage, not revenge. Silence. Silence that made her question everything. Then came the perfect moment. Friday night. She came home early. He was sitting in the living room, calm, with a glass of wine. On the table, a folder. Her name on the cover, and the lover's. Inside photos, dates, reports. She went pale. "Mark, it's not what you think." He looked up. "Sarah, I'm not thinking anything. I just know." No anger in his voice. No hatred. Just quiet clarity. "I'm not here to humiliate you," he said. "You made your choice. I made mine." Then he handed her another envelope. Divorce papers, already signed by him. She only had to add her signature. She couldn't speak. Her hands shook. You wanted freedom, he said softly. Here it is.